Welcome back, capital F football fans, to the O&O Sports YouTube channel. Today we are going over our previews and predictions for what should be another great week of college football. It's week 11 of the 2024 college football season. As always, be sure to like and subscribe, and just as a reminder, we have our $100 giveaway going for the season. Be sure to follow us on our social medias for a chance to win. And without further ado, let's jump into some games to watch this week, starting with Florida at 5th ranked Texas. This is a huge matchup in the SEC, and most people probably won't even realize it. Florida has not been great this year, but they have been improving despite Graham Mertz going down earlier this year. DJ Lagway has stepped up and been a pretty good option for them at quarterback, and they had Georgia on their heels last week before he too got injured. Not sure how available he'll be this week, but Napier has said it is trending positively, so we shall see. Next, let's look at Syracuse at Boston College. This is a pretty big matchup for both teams. Boston College has steadily been regressing this season, but they didn't have a terrible game versus a good Louisville team 2 weeks ago, and they're coming off a bye this week, while Syracuse is coming off a big win over Virginia Tech last week. They'll have to travel to Boston College for this one. That adds a very dynamic element to this one. Should be very interesting at the very least. Now let's look at UCF at Arizona State. Both of these teams are coming off pretty big wins last week, and they'll be meeting at pretty interesting times in their seasons here. UCF is 4-5, and they're looking for a big momentum swing to get them bowl eligible this year. And it'd be great to start here, but Arizona State is already bowl eligible. They've had an amazing season so far. Cam Scatabo is already over 1,000 yards on the year with 11 touchdowns, and they are pretty good at stopping the run as well. But last week, Dylan Risk for UCF looked like a much better passer than KJ Jefferson, at least. Interested to see if he can have another great performance and potentially get the win here. Now let's look at Mississippi State at 7th ranked Tennessee. Now at first glance you might be like, this is not a game to watch, why are we talking about this? What's interesting here is that Mississippi State's offense isn't terrible. Dylan Sampson and Nico will probably have a field day against that Bulldog defense, but Mississippi State's offense is capable of putting up points at the very least, which could be important if the Volunteer defense comes into this one and decides to take the day off, like it feels they have at times this year. The Bulldogs have guys. Michael Van Buren is decent with a lot of upside. He's got a couple good backs, a couple good receivers, and if they're able to force a turnover or two, or at least luck into a turnover or two, they have the potential to force the issue here. Now we have Oklahoma at newly ranked Missouri. Both of these teams are in strange spots in this one. They've both been battling injuries. Oklahoma's been cycling quarterbacks a lot this year. It looks like Jackson Arnold is their guy again. Not entirely sure why he was benched in the first place. We think he's easily the best option that they've had all year. But both these teams have had average to decent offenses and below average to bad defenses at times this year. Both have had turnover issues as well, Oklahoma more so than Missouri, and both teams are in search of a W here, which should make for a good watch. Now let's look at Washington at 6th ranked Penn State. We want to keep an eye on this one because this is a huge spot for Washington specifically. They're getting a beaten down Penn State that did not respond well to adversity last week. Obviously, Ohio State is a much better team than Washington, but they've got a shot here to come into Happy Valley and squander whatever playoff hopes Penn State has left, especially if they can force a couple turnovers here. Not super likely. They haven't been exceptional at that this year. We're going to lead Penn State here for very good reason, but a very intriguing matchup nonetheless. And last in our games to watch, it's 9th ranked BYU at Utah. It's the Big 12 after dark. BYU has been awesome this year. Jake Retzlaff has been very solid throwing and running the football this year. They got a couple solid running backs in Martin and Rapati. A couple great receivers on the perimeter as well. Have struggled a bit with turnovers this year, but have mitigated that by forcing over 2 turnovers a game on defense. This is a very solid team, definitely the best team in the Big 12 to this point, but they're facing a Utah defense that was considered top 10 coming into this year. Lots of injuries on that side. Still very good now, probably not elite. The offense, however, is not elite or good or even decent. But this is still probably the best defense the Mormons have faced this year, which by itself makes this one a game we're excited to watch. And last, let's look at our group of 5 highlight matchup. It's 25th ranked Army at North Texas. North Texas has been in a lot of important group of 5 matchups the last few weeks. This one is one of the biggest matchups of the week by itself. This is most likely the best team Army has faced this year in a mean green team led by Chandler Morris, who has been phenomenal this year. The passing game is what you're going to need here against a very rough and gritty Army defense. They're going to have an insane rushing tag as per usual as well, something that North Texas hasn't been too keen on defending this year. This will likely be another 300 to 400 potentially yard day on the ground for the Black Knights, but North Texas absolutely has a route to victory here with the passing game, like we said, especially if they can force a turnover in this one. We've said that for the past couple teams, but that will be huge. They're going to want to make their possessions count here. Every single one will matter when you're facing a boa constrictor offense like Jeff Monken's Army teams have had. Should be very interesting, but we are going to have to go with Army in this one. And now let's look at our big impact matchups this week, starting with the ACC. It's the 4th ranked Miami Hurricanes traveling to Atlanta to take on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Who remembers how this one ended last year? It was the fumble on the run play in garbage time that led to the miraculous walk-off touchdown for the Yellow Jackets. It was a huge upset, and they have the chance to pull off an even bigger one this year against a top 4 Miami team who averages over 550 yards per game, nearly 50 points per game, and has had a defense which could use improvement, but hasn't been overly detrimental to the team as a whole. And they're going to have to show out in a big way offensively to win this one, which they can, but they've only averaged about 28 points a game this year, a little bit disappointing. Haynes King, Jamal Haynes, Chad Alexander, Malik Rutherford, essentially all of their key skill position players are going to have big days here if Georgia Tech wants to win this one. Now let's look at 23rd ranked Clemson at Virginia Tech. Clemson drops all the way to 23 in the CFP poll. Unfortunate if you are a Tiger fan. They're coming off a big upset loss against Louisville at home last week. Go back and watch our last video if you want to get the highlights on that. And they have to go on the road to Blacksburg, Virginia to take on a pretty solid Hokies team who was without Kyron Drones and Bajal Tootin last week. If both of those guys are back this week, and it looks like they will be, it could be a real disaster scenario for the Tigers, especially since they lost to a very good quarterback running back duo last week. Would be facing one of those on that same level this week. Virginia Tech's defense probably isn't as good as Louisville's, but Clemson's going to want to be much more aggressive this week than they were last week. They're going to need to force the issue defensively, get Drones or Schlee or whoever it may be at quarterback on the ground early, get a lot of quarterback pressure because they obviously cannot afford to play safe and sleepwalk through this one if they want to keep their ACC title dreams alive. Now let's move on to the Big Ten with Michigan at 8th ranked Indiana. This is going to be a huge matchup in the Big Ten to possibly determine the fate of the Big Ten. Indiana comes into this one ranked 8th in the country and has walked all over the Big Ten thus far. Michigan has prided itself on its defense this year. This will easily be the best defense Indiana has faced this year, but it feels like we say that every week, and there has been nobody capable of stopping the Hoosiers so far. There are a lot of exploitable holes in that Michigan secondary, especially if Will Johnson is not available again this week, and that offense is looking to have another great day. Curtis Rourke is back, most likely. He played last week. Justice Elson averages 6 yards a carry. The defense has been very solid for the Hoosiers. It'll just be a matter of winning in the trenches and not allowing Kalel Mullings or Donovan Edwards to have great days here. Now let's look at 20th ranked Colorado at Texas Tech. These are two big overachievers in the Big 12 in our opinion. We thought Texas Tech would be solid before the year started, but they just knocked off the undefeated Iowa State Cyclones last week, and they are going to be living off that high in this one. And this should be an outstanding matchup. Shadur Sanders versus Baron Morton, Travis Hunter versus Josh Kelly, Taj Brooks versus an improved Colorado defensive front. This has all the makings of a barn burner, maybe one of the best games of the year. And for Colorado, it'll just be a matter of staying on schedule. Don't get too enthusiastic. You're going to have opportunities down the field. That Texas Tech defense isn't amazing. You don't need to get it all at once. Stick with what works. Don't get overzealous. And for the Red Raiders, it'll be more about establishing that passing game, but also getting Taj Brooks involved early. You saw it work with Kansas State. You saw it work with Nebraska. And if you can replicate those performances, hint, hint, Colorado's only 2 losses this year, and have a decent day on defense, you have as good of a chance as ever to win this one. Now let's look at South Carolina at Vanderbilt. This matchup is absolutely awesome. We love both of these teams this year. It'll really be a battle of who deserves the top 25 the most. Both of these teams actually got snubbed in the CFP rankings this week, which is absolutely egregious in our opinion. Somehow Missouri gets in over them. Don't agree with that at all. But we think this game is going to come down to South Carolina. It'll be a matter of if they can show up like they did last week, aggressive, confident, efficient as a whole. They'll need to have all those good things on the road this week. And if they can replicate even half of that performance, they'll win this game. Vanderbilt is a good team. We don't want to sleep on them, but the Gamecocks are absolutely the better team in this one. If they want it more and don't play off their back feet, which they have at times this year, this should be South Carolina all day. And last in our big impact matchups, let's look at 11th ranked Alabama at 14th ranked LSU. What a great matchup this will be. It was actually second in our game of the week voting, narrowly losing to the game of the week. You'll see who that is in a second, and very reasonably so. Both of these teams are coming off bye weeks. Both teams have had their fair share of struggles this year. For LSU, it's been the run game in our opinion. Caden Durham has been a phenomenal option for you this year. Would like to see them focus on him, but they've given the keys solely to Garrett Nussmeier, it feels like, who has been very good this year. He's been able to spread the ball out very well, just not sure how we like him in clutch situations just yet. Luckily for them, they will have home field advantage against an Alabama team who has been very good running the football, both with their running back duo of GM Miller and Justice Haynes, and with quarterback Jalen Milroe. Very dynamic threat at quarterback there. Surprisingly, haven't been amazing defensively this year. If LSU were to heavily enact the run game at any point this year, now would be a good time for them to. This feels like a true toss-up game. It'll probably end up coming down to whoever has a cleaner game. Our eyes will be glued to this one. And now it's your O&O Sports capital G game of the week. Second ranked Georgia at 16th ranked Ole Miss. This game is going to be absolutely electric. Georgia is coming off a pretty bad win over Florida last week in Jacksonville. Carson Beck had a noticeably bad day. They weren't very efficient running the football. They forced 2 turnovers, which was big for them and probably the reason they won this one, but they gave up the ball 3 times, which easily could have cost them this one, especially if they were playing a team like, say, Ole Miss, who has been great at generating and scoring off turnovers this year, who's been extremely efficient in their last 2 games, who's got one of the best quarterbacks in the country in Jackson Dart, whose defense has been steadily improving over the course of their last 4 or 5 games. This is really a nightmare scenario for Georgia in our opinion. If they can come out and play like they did against Texas, it could be a huge day for them with big defensive performances where they disrupt the backfield and force Jackson Dart to have a bad game. And if the trend follows, they absolutely could, seeing as they seem to flip-flop from being an average team to an elite team week to week. Either way, should be a very interesting game to watch, and your players who watch in this one will be the defensive lineman Jalen Walker for Georgia. We haven't talked about him yet. He's a huge disruptor on that Georgia front. If he can apply pressure to Dart, throw him off his game, maybe get a sack, maybe get a couple pressures on him, it should make all the difference. His stats this season, he has got 34 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, a pass defense, and 2 fumble recoveries. And for Ole Miss, it's going to be the quarterback, Jackson Dart. He's been easily the best player on that team, one of the best players in the country. He's throwing for a 71.7% completion percentage for 3,200 yards, 21 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, with an additional 77 carries for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now let's move on into our upset watch with our good friend Todd. Everybody say hello to Todd. Thank you. Starting with the game in Texas, it's Texas versus Florida, who is a 21.5 point underdog. Like we said earlier, Florida is coming off a pretty decent loss. If DJ Lagway is back, they should be in a pretty decent spot here. Todd likes Florida a lot right now, but Texas is a 3 touchdown favorite for a reason. They're the much better team here, and it's going to be played in DKR. Todd has this one at a 5 on the upset scale. Give us Texas here with Florida potentially covering. Now let's look at 7th ranked Tennessee versus Mississippi State, who is a 23.5 point underdog. We don't expect a lot from Mississippi State here. Like we said, the offense is okay. They are still far from a good team overall. and they very well could have a good day here, but in my opinion, it will take a huge letdown game from the Volunteers for this one to be close, and Todd agrees. He's going to have this one at a 1 on the upset scale in the cold zone. He's not too worried about Tennessee here. Now let's look at 9th ranked BYU at Utah, who is only a 3.5 point underdog. This is the most interesting matchup on our upset watch this week. Utah is going to have a chance here. UCF was actually favored over BYU last week, and then BYU went out and smoked them, but the Utes will have a shot to win this one. Don't like their offense at all, like we said, not even a little bit, but if their defense can put on a masterclass, they stand a solid chance of winning this one, but neither myself nor Todd are convinced that's what's going to happen this week. Todd has this one at a 7 out of 10. He's factoring in that home field advantage, but we'd be surprised if BYU doesn't win and cover here. And now let's move on into our big impact predictions. Here are all of your matchups this week. Look at how glorious they are. Look at all these great games. Starting with Miami at Georgia Tech. We like Georgia Tech this year as a 6 or 7 win team, but they don't have the offense to match up in this one, frankly. You never know. They could have a great game and prove me wrong. Been wrong a good few times this year. Surprise, surprise. That's possible, but it's fair to say we think Miami wins this one in epic fashion. Give us the Hurricanes to win 55-27. Now let's look at Clemson at Virginia Tech. This is a classic letdown spot for a team like Clemson, who has struggled with being overly conservative in big games this year. We expect Kyron Drones and Basil Tutin to be back this week. Brent Pry is going to want to be aggressive. They're going to be in front of a big Hokie home crowd, and they've played very well at home this year. They're playing inspired football, something Clemson hasn't shown they can do in their 2 biggest matchups this year. Give us Virginia Tech to win this game 31-21. And now let's look at Michigan at Indiana. To us, it's as simple as saying we expect these 2 teams to play exactly how they've played all year. Both of these teams have showed us who they are and haven't really delineated from the path that they've been on over the course of this season. We're comfortable saying that Michigan probably won't have a very good game on offense. We're also comfortable saying Indiana probably will have a very good game on offense. And with that, we're going with the Hoosiers in this one, 31-14. Now let's look at Colorado at Texas Tech. What a matchup this should be. 2 great offenses, 2 improving defenses. We think the offenses should be the shining light in this one though. Like we said earlier, great quarterback duel, great matchups on the perimeter, interesting element of Taj Brooks and the home crowd. How are they going to be at play here? Are they going to have a big impact on this game? But ultimately, we think Colorado is going to win this one on the road, 38-31. Now let's go to South Carolina at Vanderbilt, which should be 2 ranked teams facing off in the SEC this week. Like we said earlier, we think this game is South Carolina's to lose. Vandy has a good offense. Diego Pavia has been one of the most fun players to watch this year. He's been great for Vanderbilt, but that Gamecock defense, those edge rushers, that quarterback, that running back, those receivers, it's just too much to handle for the Commodores in our opinion. Give us South Carolina to win this one 27-20. And now let's look at Alabama at LSU. This one has caused a lot of trouble for us this week. This should be a very interesting matchup. That basically goes without saying. Very hard to call. Either of these teams could add a wrinkle that we haven't seen them add this year that sets them apart in this one. We like LSU at home. They've played some great ball at home this year, especially in the win over Ole Miss a few weeks ago, but we're going to have to go with Alabama here. We like their offense more. We also like their defense on a good day a little bit more. Not sure if they will have a good day, obviously, but we're expecting that more than for LSU. Todd likes the Crimson Tide a lot more also, so I hope he's not letting me down here. Give us Alabama to win this one on the road, 27-24. And for your O&O Sports game of the week, it's Georgia at Ole Miss. This could be a huge game for a number of reasons. For one, if Ole Miss wins, you have another huge shakeup in the top 10, potentially a completely different outlook on the conference as well. But if Georgia wins, you're looking at the favorite to win the SEC. They've got another game next week against Tennessee that if they win, along with the game this week, should all but seal that race. But not so fast, my friend. Ole Miss has been on fire recently. They're coming into this one with a lot of steam. Georgia, not so much, and they're traveling to Oxford to play in front of what should be an insane crowd at Ole Miss. and we are calling an upset. Sound the alarms. We think this one goes in favor of the Rebels. Give us Ole Miss to win this one 34-28. And that's going to wrap it up for this video. As always, be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment, share, do all those good things, and be sure to tune in early next week for our recap of this great week of college football. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.